Prop 13, you mentioned Prop 13. What are your thoughts on Prop 13?
Well, my personal thoughts or the organization thoughts?
Whatever.
So, I mean, I think that there are a number of issues that have led us to where we are today, and one of the big questions is our tax system. And I think we're probably all in agreement on a lot of the stuff that that we think either needs to change or at least needs to be really dove into with a real discussion. There were a lot of ramifications of Prop 13, and I think in some ways we've been fishtailing back and forth since then. And, regardless of if you think you need to change taxes or not, because we talk to people that believe the tax vote needs to be changed, and we talk to people that believe that it doesn't, we really believe that you aren't going to have a successful conversation at the state level on how you fund and prioritize programs until you build the trust in the state government. And that's kind of what I said before, and I still think I think that's extremely important. So, when we talk about the 2/3 budget vote versus 2/3 budget and tax vote reduction, one of the big reasons is you can't even have that conversation and expect to get anywhere on the ballot with 2/3 taxes. And that's, I think that's just a political reality of today. I mean, there was a poll that was done that came out 2 days ago that said that the legislature is at a 13% approval rating. That's not trust in government. That's a historically low number. I don't think it's ever been that low. So that, so the question on 13 is a really good one, and I have a lot of my own personal thoughts. Organizationally, we haven't dove into the revenue side yet, so I couldn't really speak for the organization on that, but that's a part of what's to come. For us and the proposals that we're putting forward, we think that you have to stop the madness right now, and one of the big places that you do that is with the budget process. If you talk to anybody on the streets of California and you say, what's going on in the state legislature, they would tell you that there's budget stalemates and that, the state's giving out IOUs. I mean, it's the kind of thing that everybody knows, and that goes a long way towards eroding any kind of trust that exists. So I mean, I think there's a lot of very difficult questions and conversations that need to be had in the state, and I think that a lot of that isn't going to get any airtime until we fix this budget process. So if you look at the last 18 months, there's a ton of really important stuff that never got any public attention. I mean, you hear a lot about water right now, but there's been stuff happening, for months and months and months that the legislature wasn't able to really address because they were caught in the budget fiasco. So there's a lot of things I could say around the moment and how it relates to Prop 13, but I think that pretty much gets at some of my early thoughts.
I think we need to make it very clear at the outset that we're having two conversations here. We're having a conversation about the types of reforms that we want to see, and that would be Prop 13 reform and all the other reforms. And then there's the process question. How do we get there? Our job at the Bay Area Council is not to promote reforms. Our job is to put in place the process to get us the reforms. That's what we're trying to do, is to build a constitutional convention process that can get us those reforms. We have our own ideas, and we're a policy organization, so we've taken positions that we can't run away from or hide from. But it's not our job to promote those policies or those ideas within a constitutional convention. We are just trying to put in place a transparent working process that can get us those reforms. I like to say we're trying to create a process that everybody can see into but nobody can reach into and move the pieces around. A constitutional convention differs from the initiative process in a number of ways, and I'll briefly explain why we think the constitutional convention can get us Prop 13 reforms, can get us term limit reforms in a way that the initiative process can't. If you look at Prop 13 right now, everybody, and I've had this conversation with earnest Republicans as well, they understand that Prop 13 is fatally flawed. The average person on the street thinks that Prop 13 is about protecting seniors, whereas in fact it's about so much more, and it is so damaging to the state in so many different ways that the unintended consequences of that initiative are reach far beyond seniors. But you try to reform Prop 13 through the initiative process, you die day one. Nobody will give a dime to an initiative process that reforms Prop 13. It will not happen. You can't have that conversation through a 2-week campaign where the Howard Jarvis folks throw their millions at it and the anti-Prop 13 folks throw their millions at it. You lose. Prop 13 polls at 70% plus still. Within a constitutional convention context, you have a 6-month conversation with a group of Californians who probably, when they enter the room, have that same 70% approval rating for Prop 13 because they think it's about protecting seniors. But through the 6-month process of discussing Prop 13 and becoming educated about it, understanding the ramifications, understanding that it handcuffs their local school districts, understanding that it has turned California into a land of strip malls because local government doesn't want to build housing. They only want to build sales tax revenue generating structures. And all the many things that Prop 13 has done to the state, you can have that conversation in a constitutional convention over months that the people will be watching on their televisions, they'll be watching on the internet, and they'll be going, oh yeah, I didn't know that about Prop 13. Well, who knew? And at the end of that, when the convention decides, well, we think we need to say perhaps let's grandfather in, no pun intended, the seniors who we want to protect in their homes, but let's reform these other parts of Prop 13 that are flawed, that we really understand now 30 years hence have damaged California. The 2/3 vote and the budget being another one. Let's reform those parts of Prop 13 that really need reforming and leave those parts that we really think need to be protected, and whether you think seniors need protection in the housing, that's another issue. But it polls so well, we probably think a convention would do something along those lines. But that's the process we think that is the only process that can get us to Prop 13 reform. The initiative process will get torpedoed day one. We also think term limits is another issue that polls. If you had a term limit initiative tomorrow, the voters would vote to shorten term limits. I mean, and anybody who has spent any time in Sacramento, and Fiona will attest to this, will understand that it's the worst thing that has happened to the Capitol ever. I was a Capitol staffer many years ago, and I've worked as a lobbyist in Sacramento, and I've watched how that building has changed. You have freshman legislators chairing committees. They're being led around by the nose by lobbyists, being shown where the bathrooms are. And there's no institutional knowledge, there are no relationships that have been built over years, and there's no ability within the legislative body to fight the entrenched interests. So, but you can't have that conversation through the initiative process, but you can have that conversation in a constitutional convention. So that's the process side of things. The reforms, we have our ideas on what reforms we'd like to see, and I think we agree with everybody else here at the table on what those reforms need to be. But for us, it's a question of process. What process can get us there in the quickest and most efficient manner?